Okay, folks. Hopefully we're back. Hoping this doesn't royally mess anybody up too bad. Oh. Oof, folks, we are back. Big mood. Okay, so Spanish-American War. It's a whole thing. So the Spanish-American War, when we're looking at reasons, y'all, I'm sorry. Apparently there's a new encoder that they were trying to have me use with like YouTube, and it was glitchy. So I'm streaming through Google Hangouts now, which is what I usually do. So now I'm back to that. As I didn't really get a chance to see what the conversation was on the last chat towards the end there. I saw that you guys knew that it was buffering, knew that there were some issues, but I was trying to, figure out. I think I started like 3 different live streams that weren't working, so now this one works. So we're in a good mood. So the Spanish-American War happens. We have the introduction of the Rough Riders, the Buffalo Soldiers. This is where Teddy Roosevelt becomes a big deal. This is where Jack Pershing gets his gets a lot of kind of his claim to fame, because it's before World War I. This is like the first act in battle that we're going to see. Okay, so the Spanish-American War, though, are issues with Cuba. We feel that Cuba is falling to a regime that we don't approve of, and we need to help the Cuban people. So we go in and try to help the people of Cuba. Specifically, like when McKinley goes into Cuba and kind of declares war for the United States. We're looking at imperialism. This all happens during McKinley. Oh. We take on the Philippines, but we're going to eventually tell them that if the Philippines can set up a stable government, we're going to kind of let them alone and let them have a thing. We have countries like Cuba who, and it's really, this should go the other way. Our dealings with Cuba is what kind of get us involved in this war. We declare war largely because we were trying to help Cuba, but some people felt like we'd be acting in too much of an imperialistic manner. People aren't going to like that. And it's also going to create issues for, are we going to give citizenship rights to people in occupied lands? Is that going to be a thing? Are people of Puerto Rico going to be able to vote? What does that look like? So, yeah. What else we're trying to look? All right, so when we look at World War I, so this is reasons for imperialism. This is kind of largely, as we're looking at the things, largely as we're looking at imperialism, we know that America wants to grow their power around the world. Jalen asked me earlier on Remind. She said, who was the person, who was the queen that we took Hawaii from? That was like Sanford Dole was in charge of that. He's the one who kind of edges us towards that. Go back and look at those notes, guys. Look at the links in the Google Classroom for that kind of section. We're going to be looking at World War I next. All right. World War I. All right, so okay, so this is kind of, we're going to do a kind of a quick hit of the highlights here. Quick hit of the highlights here. Wah, 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 wah. Okay. Okay, so causes of World War I. M-A-I-N. This would be militarism. This would be alliances. While I'm doing these, why don't you guys talk about reasons for U.S. entry? Imperialism and nationalism. All of these things are going to lead to all of these pieces are going to lead to war, essentially. So reasons for U.S. entry is slugs. Those are the primary reasons. We have the sinking of the Lusitania. No, that's not right. Sorry. That's not what that is. Everything's wrong. This one, the S, is for Sussex Pledge. Oh my God. Okay. Sussex Pledge, the L is for the Lusitania. The Lusitania sinking, U is for unrestricted. Submarine. Warfare. The G is for alliance with Great Britain. Great Big Mood. And the Zimmerman Note. Now, of these, what do you guys have questions about? The agreement that Germany would stop firing American ships. That was the Sussex Pledge. Yes, so they did give warnings about the unrestricted submarine warfare, but there was, for the Lusitania, they gave warning, but it was kind of like the first time. This was like the first time it happens, and like after this, we say, okay, you're not allowed to do this anymore. So that was kind of, that made us mad, but we didn't go to war because of that right away. With the sinking of the Lusitania, the warning that was given, and American passengers saw it, except for the Lusitania. The Lusitania was a British ship, but it had a lot of Americans on it, and that was kind of the thing here, is it had a lot of Americans on it, and when it gets sunk and it's like civilians, and there's civilians on there, America gets really mad. So a few other things. Moving on to the home front. Unrestricted submarine warfare is what it sounds like. Kevin, yes, they suspected that the U.S. was putting weapons on civilian ships. We have ties with Great Britain. Our close ties with Great Britain are what it's going to, when like they hurt, we hurt. We have like that. Not that all twins have this, but like it's like we have like the twin telepathy. Like they hurt, we hurt. Now with the Zimmerman note, this is the one that had to do with the German ambassador writing to Mexico, and basically saying, if you join our side in the war, if we win, we're going to give you back New Mexico, Texas, and all this other stuff. Moving on to the home front, though, because the home front's pretty interesting in this sense. And also, guys, when we go into this war, Wilson, things to remember about Wilson. Wilson wants self-determination. He's all about democratic ideologies. So he wants like national self-determination. We're going to get involved in European affairs. We're going to stop. We're not going to practice isolationism anymore. But largely during Wilson's presidency, when we're looking at like the League of Nations, when we're looking at all that, Wilson, referred to him in one of my classes as Willowy Wilson, because not that he's like hippy dippy, but he does some things that are kind of hippy dippy, like all of his like views on the Treaty of Versailles, which we'll get to in a little bit. So the home front, the First Amendment. You need to know about First Amendment restrictions. Essentially, there wasn't really freedom of speech because the things you say could cause harm to American troops, which was a whole big mood. There was a lot of nativism versus immigrants on the home front in terms of who can be more supportive during this time of war. You use war bonds to do it. That was a way that like immigrants could prove just how great they were. The Palmer raids are happening during this time period. First Amendment restrictions, that's Schenck versus the U.S. When there's a clear and present danger, the U.S. can, when there's a clear and present danger, the U.S. can restrict First Amendment rights in a time of war. The AEF was the American Expeditionary Force, led by General Jack Pershing, in the Battle of Argonne Forest. The American Expeditionary Force, that was the AEF, that was during World War I on the Western Front in Europe. This is who kind of ran that. The AEF was on the Western Front during Europe. Jack Pershing ran it. The siege at Moisargon, and eventually the Battle of Argonne Forest. This is basically the battle that kind of turns the tide in favor. Turns the tide for the Allies. It turns the tide for the Allies. Alvin York, that was the article you guys read. He wins the Medal of Honor. That's pretty much the AEF. That's kind of where that is. During this war, we have, to kind of like add to ideas here, we have the trench warfare, we have tanks and machine guns. All of these kind of end up leading to some mass lead to some pretty mass casualties, and also stalemates. They lead to a lot of stalemates because when you have people in trenches, they don't need to when you have people in trenches, they don't need to, they're not charging at each other. The tanks mean that you can just roll through stuff. Machine guns means there's just mass casualties all the time. And so the trenches, tanks, machine guns, they kind of lead to stalemates and also just massive loss of life across the board. Again, this is known as the war to end all wars, the Great War. That's why. The Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles. So, Treaty of Versailles. Yeah, trench foot is nasty. Dallas, that's a gross thing to look up, but you do you. Treaty of Versailles. Originally, Wilson wants his 14 points. For peace. Basically, everybody's a winner. Everybody, let's just be peaceful. Let's just kind of find our chill. He absolutely does not get it. We punish Germany pretty severely. They have to. Germany is punished pretty severely. They're punished in terms of the things that they're going to have, the war reparations they're going to have to pay. They're in terms of war reparations, they're kind of demilitarization, they're occupied, they're all of these issues. It's just kind of ridiculous. The only thing that comes out of the Treaty of Versailles from his 14 points is the League of Nations. Crystal just asked you, do we need to know all 14 points? Here's the thing. You don't need to know all 14 points, but you don't need to know all 14 points, but you need to know kind of the idea behind them, and that is that they were all about peace. So if you were to have a list of which of the following is part of Wilson's plan for peace, if it is anything that seems combative or restrictive or looks like it's gearing up for a fight, that's not it. Because Wilson was let's demilitarize each other. Let's have let's lay down our arms. Let's do all that. He is all about peace, peace, peace. And when you look at that, everything about it, let's have free trade. Let's have open diplomacy. It's all very it's all very chill. He just wants everyone to be chill with each other. He wants us to have a League of Nations, and wouldn't that be great? With the League of Nations, the U.S. is torn. Henry Cabot Lodge says, here's the thing, we'll accept the Treaty of Versailles, but we want to have a seat at the table in the League of Nations, but we don't want to have to do what they say if we don't want to. Mostly because there's two different there's two different sides to this, sort of, in the sense that we have Henry Cabot Lodge. We have people who are Wilsonians who are going to support the Treaty of Versailles and desperately want it passed. In fact, Wilson's going to campaign so hard for it, he has a stroke, and that happens in 1919, which is rough. We have some people who say, here's the thing, we'll take the Treaty of Versailles, just not the League of Nations, or we'll take the Treaty of Versailles and the League of Nations, like, if we want. It's kind of all in the middle. So the Treaty of Versailles, though, it punishes Germany really hard. Anything you see about the Treaty of Versailles, things look bad for Germany. Now, in the year 1919, we're going to see kind of an upswing of a lot of ugly. We got racial tensions, we have race riots, we have a Red Scare, we have the Spanish flu, the president has a stroke, and essentially, when he has this stroke, it means that he's kind of incapacitated. His wife is quote unquote getting orders from him, but there's like word that maybe she's just doing what she wants, and she's like, well, it's what he would have wanted, and they're like, this is not how America should run. So the race riots are taking place. Really, it's part of the immigrants, new immigrants coming in, and the racial tension. It has to do with immigrants, has to do with the Jim Crow. We have the Great Migration happening, which is where we have this new influx of people to the cities, specifically African Americans are going to the cities in droves, and there's kind of fights break out between, because of the Great Migration, because of this new influx of African Americans into the cities, it causes a lot of racial tension, and we're going to see those happen in a lot of big cities. The Red Scare, we have the Palmer raids, which eventually kind of peter out because there's not enough evidence to support them. And the reason we were afraid of this is kind of the communism. Why were we afraid of communism at this time? Why are we afraid of it? Nathan, that had to do with the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. We were nervous about it because of the Bolshevik Revolution and what had happened in Russia. We were afraid that what had happened in Russia, or now the Soviet Union, is going to invade the U.S. It's going to be a problem. And so the Palmer raids was this guy Palmer trying to go and find a lot of communists, essentially. But basically, there's a lack of evidence, and people are like, this is just large conspiracy. Spanish flu kills people around the world. In 1919, and it's a rough one. It's a rough one for sure. Something else you guys are going to need to know, there are flashback questions from period 3. Y'all, on y'all's last test, that was actually where you shined the most, was in those flashback questions. So you do have a few flashback questions from the American Revolution time period. Just as a heads up. Questions you guys have for me? Because I would like to eat my dinner, because I came home straight from work and slept for about 15 minutes, woke up, slept for 10 more minutes, and then started this live stream. Then the live stream turned off, and then all the things. So y'all, just so you know, on your tests, be thinking in terms, there's going to be, I want to say 50 questions. Just do your best. Yeah, I don't think it should be too bad. There's a lot of things are happening. What am I eating for dinner? I had Bangkok Bistro deliver. That was why I had to mute the last live stream. So good stuff. So it's a good day. Yeah, but Sid, I'll say this. Not all of them are stimulus-based questions. We pulled some off of the K-test. So you guys will have more like star questions as we kind of come around. All right, thanks for listening. You know what, Dallas? There is chicken in my food, so there's that. All right, I'm going to end this live stream.